LSD, mushrooms, ayahuasca. This is my first time with cactus.
I'm not hallucinating.
It's tickly.
It's
just like a bit tipsy.
A bit more vivid. All my senses are just attuning.
It's like a big reset on your brain. It's like your computer that's been going, right? And then you just push the reset button and then, you kind of start again.
Psychedelic drugs have come out of the scientific wilderness and are taking centre stage once more. People desperately seeking help are turning to them.
At the moment, we have a mental health epidemic that's getting worse by the day.
We're trying to undo 50 years of suppression of these kind of drugs.
As promising clinical trials are underway in therapy rooms around the world, a darker side has also been exposed.
It was really hard to watch those videos.
I recall yelling from the room like, what the fuck is going on? Oh my God.
We go into a world of secrecy and threats.
They had started to monitor my phone and emails. So at that point, I felt very scared for my personal safety.
They threatened me with bankruptcy.
Tonight on Four Corners, we investigate the race to unlock the potential of psychedelic drugs as medicine, and a community bitterly divided over how hard and how fast to push. With a potential fortune to be made and some of the most vulnerable at risk, the stakes have never been higher.
Is everyone here?
Let's sure who's supposed to
Yeah,
come.
that's right. I think everyone's here.
In a car park on the outskirts of Sydney, a group of 9 relative strangers is about to embark on a psychedelic voyage.
The idea is you take cactus, which the cactus contains mescaline, which is a very pure psychoactive compound, and we go walking in nature all day.
The man providing the drugs is self-styled psychedelic guru Julian Palmer.
I'm going to ask you about your dose and how much you want to do. And it's very tricky to dose it because it's in a powder, and I've got some organic apple juice.
What he's doing is illegal, but this group believe the benefits outweigh the risks.
And what we've got to do is get it as quickly as possible into the juice so you can get it down. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. And that's like less than 10 seconds. You've got to stir really fast and then take it down really quickly. And then if you don't take it down quickly, it will kind of congeal. A bit more juice. All right.
I gotta drink all of that?
Well, I'm gonna... It's a slow come on. It's about 1.5, 2 hours. You're gonna start noticing it. Oh, good.
I've taken a strong dose, so and I'm familiar with the medicine, so I know what I'll be looking for and what I'm going to be feeling.
I might grab my tissues, actually.
After taking the drugs, the group plans to hike in the bush until nightfall.
We're a bunch of strangers, and at the end of this, we'll be wanting to start a cult together. A lot of people are seeking out psychedelics because of trauma, issues like depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, ennui, generally not feeling right.
I've suffered a lot in my life. I've been victim of trauma and abuse from a very young age in my life. I've suffered, and I know pain at the deepest level, and I choose not to experience that. I wanted everything I could find out about this medicine because it was touted as having the potential to rewire my brain, and at some point I felt like there must have been something wrong with my brain.
Well, I did an ayahuasca retreat with Julian in February, and I've been actually following Julian's stuff for a while now. When you kind of do your Google research, Julian pops up, so you just end up... You just follow him, and then you kind of go, yeah, I'll do one of his retreats. He seems legit. I think he thinks he does seem legit.
I was thinking today to not take the cactus, but it's good for me to be on the same page, and I can join in with them.
The effects of the mescaline begin within an hour.
It's not going to be too strong, but it might be for you at times.
Oh, because I'm small.
Yes. It can be unexpectedly strong for some people at times.
We were joking, I think, earlier, just then. It's like people damage themselves so they can heal themselves. So, maybe we just, do a lot of damages early on so we can then go on a healing path and then go, we'll heal others. I need a tissue.
It's the fullest expression, I guess, of being human for me, is to be in nature and clothes seem almost irrelevant.
You have to film his shirt, it's very trippy.
The members of the group each paid Julian Palmer $170 for this experience. They're part of a growing number of people wanting some form of healing through the use of psychedelic drugs.
Yeah, and then it changes. The level of demand is huge. A lot of people are self-medicating, especially the psilocybin mushrooms, whether microdosing or to different degrees macrodosing, and a lot of those people are getting good results as well.
On the other side of the country in Perth, the increasing demand for psychedelics has caught the attention of big corporate interests. We're on our way to a commercial drug production facility after clearance from the Australian Federal Police. Its location is a closely guarded secret.
Hi, Elise, how are you?
Good, nice to meet you.
We'll need you to put that on for the drive into the facility.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
In a car park a few hours from Perth, we are blindfolded for the rest of the journey.
All right, Elise, we're here.
I take off the blindfold?
You can take your blindfold off now.
Sean Duffy, the CEO of Reset Mind Sciences, is leading the way. He and everyone else who works here needs to undergo a strict criminal history check.
Clearly we're holding substances here that are used in the illicit market and that aren't generally available, and so the security protocols are absolutely essential for us to comply with our Office of Drug Control requirements, and we take that incredibly seriously. Let's see what's going on in here.
This facility is growing medicinal-grade cannabis and has serious financial backing. Australia's richest person, Gina Reinhardt, has invested $15 million in the parent company that owns this site. Now it's about to move into psychedelics.
And all of that discipline that we've applied in here and learnt on the cannabis plant is exactly what we need to grow the mushrooms as well.
So we've built a specialised mushroom grow chamber.
The plan is to grow commercial quantities of magic mushrooms.
It's got first...
We're looking at being at the forefront of the development of the industry in Australia. When I meet people in the psychedelic space, and a lot of them are clinical psychologists or therapists or psychiatrists or medical researchers, I guess a lot of them look at me with a very cautious eye that I'm on this capitalist that's come into the sector to capitalise on the momentum that's being built.
The active ingredient in magic mushrooms is the psychedelic compound psilocybin. It's one of a number of psychedelic drugs like LSD and MDMA being studied in clinical trials along with therapy to treat an array of mental health conditions.
It all gets down to producing pharmaceutical-grade medicines. If you were to go and pick a mushroom in the wild, you may well know, but you can't be sure what species it is, and you certainly don't know where it's at in its growth cycle, what its psilocybin concentrations may be. If and when we're able to provide the medicine to patients, if we say there's 25 milligrams of psilocybin in it, they can be confident that there will be 25 milligrams of psilocybin in it.
Here at Monash University, Dr. Paul Lichnatski is partway through one of the few ethically approved psychedelic therapy trials in the country.
Psychedelic therapy is the ingestion of a psychedelic compound alongside a specialist form of psychotherapy. There are a range of different psychedelics that have varying effects. Psilocybin is now what you could call the flagship psychedelic of the current wave of psychedelic research, whereas LSD was far more researched in the first wave of psychedelic psychiatry.
In this room, trial participants are given psilocybin for generalised anxiety disorder.
So they would ingest a drug, they would lie down on the couch, and usually a lot of the process with psilocybin is quite internal, and our support is toward a more internal process. So eye shades, headphones with a playlist that's made for the trial, and people will often have many hours of quite an internal process.
The initial results from this trial won't be known until the end of this year.
I would say there are numerous promising signals, but it's early days. It needs to go through the proper process, and we can do it as well and as quickly as we can, because there are people whose lives are on the line and people who are desperate for new options. But we shouldn't sacrifice rigour and safety in order to roll something out more quickly. We're just arriving in Australia in this field. It's very new.
Talk about this on Monday when we did that video.
Dr. Stephen Bright from Perth's Edith Cowan University has just started Australia's first clinical trial using another psychedelic, MDMA. The trial is aimed at people with treatment-resistant PTSD.
It's kind of like skiing down a mountain. If you keep going down the same path all the time, you end up getting, deep pathways. And psychedelics are a bit like an avalanche that allow for new pathways to be set down. Given people can be quite vulnerable in these states.
Dr. Bright says there's been some promising results from overseas trials.
It shows that 2 in 3 people responded to the treatment. They didn't meet criteria for PTSD anymore, and those were people that were treatment resistant, so they'd already tried a antidepressant treatment or psychotherapy.
The most advanced clinical trials have been conducted in the United States. They're being led by non-profit research organisation, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, or MAPS. Founder Rick Doblin has spent more than 3 decades advocating for the use of psychedelic therapy to treat mental illness.
What we anticipate about 10 years from now, there'll probably be 6,000 or 7,000 psychedelic clinics just throughout the United States, and way more throughout the rest of the world. And these psychedelic clinics will be places where the therapists are cross-trained between MDMA, ketamine, psilocybin, ayahuasca, ibogaine, mescaline, whatever drugs come through the FDA, and that people go there for specialized treatment, but you have to have a clinical indication.
Former Iraq War veteran John Lubecki suffered from PTSD.
I spent 8 years with PTSD, 8 years, almost every second of every day, trying to figure out how to end my life. I've stood on a bridge thousands of times. I know what it's like to suffer
He underwent MDMA therapy through a MAPS trial and is now an advocate.
It's like doing therapy while being hugged by everyone in the world who loves you in a bathtub full of puppies licking your face.
He's one of many who says the treatment works.
I hope and I dream of a world that is almost devoid of trauma-based mental illness. And that's where I see this going.
MAPS has treated around 360 people so far in our clinical trials with MDMA-assisted therapy. And what we showed in phase 2, and we don't have the data yet for phase 3, but what we showed in phase 2 was that people keep getting better over time. The treatment is very effective. So our therapy is comparable to the other therapies that are available. But once you add MDMA to that, 2/3, 67%, no longer had PTSD at the 2-month follow-up.
But not everyone's experience has been so positive.
When I was in the clinical trial, it was just this being told repeatedly that we were groundbreaking, we were making all these changes, and that this was going to be the next cure, the next thing for trauma or PTSD.
In 2015, Megan Buisson was hoping MDMA-assisted therapy would help her process the trauma she experienced as a survivor of sexual assault. She was treated by 2 MAPS-approved therapists, Donna Dreyer, a psychiatrist, and her husband, Richard Jensen, an unlicensed therapist. The sessions were filmed.
The knife was on your hand. Did anybody help? Just that you my hand on your hand. It's okay, you're safe here. You are safe here. And don't be sorry about this. It's okay. It's your own body's reaction. It's what we're trying to address here. It's okay. It's okay.
So our model is a 2-person therapy team, often male-female, and it's an 8-hour MDMA session. The videotape is a useful tool for the patient. We also use it to train the therapists so that we monitor the sessions. We have our supervisors that watch the videotapes as therapists work with PTSD patients for the first time in order for us to give them feedback on how are they doing according to our treatment method? Are they adhering to it or not?
In Megan Buisson's first MDMA session, both therapists touch her and lay in bed with her. MAPS reviewed this session and allowed the therapist to continue.
Maybe lie down and spread your wrists forwards.
Megan Buisson can't remember what happened next. But when she was told what was on the tapes, she was horrified.
I understand in that 7-hour session now that I was gagged and pinned down and that I screamed and fought nonstop. And to the point where I tried to concuss myself to get out of that situation, because that was the only escape I had.
I was horrified. I mean, I recall yelling from the room like, what the fuck is going on? Oh my God. And when we watched the first 2 sessions, I mean, you're talking about 8 hours of footage and from 2 different cameras, and it was horrifying. Lily and I watched that footage together, and just getting through it was... I don't have words for it.
David Nichols and his partner Lily K. Ross have been campaigning for years to expose the dark side of psychedelic therapy. Their podcast, Power Trip, investigated Megan Buisson's treatment.
What happened in those sessions is harmful in and of itself. So it should have been stopped on its own terms immediately. And that may have prevented or thwarted the abuse which happened afterwards, but it should have been halted on its own terms.
But it didn't stop. Jensen and Dreyer continued further drug-assisted therapy with Megan Buisson. She moved to the remote Canadian island of Cortez, where the couple lived.
As a chemical, MDMA, it does a number of things. It increases trust, it decreases fear, it increases attachment, it increases bonding. So it creates this really intense artificial connection. And it fostered a real sense of dependency on the therapists that, in the context of the MAPS clinical trial, created a situation and a dynamic that was rife for abuse.
It was in that period that, a few months after the trial, that Richard Jensen began making sexual advances on Megan, which he told her were exposure therapy, because she had experienced sexual harm before and had been in the clinical trial to try to address some of that. And so in that sense, he was really using her backstory and her psychology to try to tell her, I'm going to help you, this is helping you. And it escalated from there into quite serious and ongoing sexual violations.
They had encouraged me to fully rupture my ties with my family, my friends, and the first clinician I really spoke to after I escaped from Cortez summarized my experiences as being seduced, drugged, raped, blamed, and held as a sex slave for 2 years, nearly 2 years. And I think that's a very succinct summary of my experiences. I was on Cortez Island for nearly 16 months, and through that time they owned me.
In 2018, Megan Buisson disclosed to MAPS that Richard Jensen had repeatedly sexually abused her.
When we did hear from the patient that there had been an unethical sexual misconduct, at that time, what she had been saying was that the therapy itself was fine. It was more that this unethical sexual misconduct happened after the therapy was over. So that made us think that we didn't need to review the videos. So we did not review those sessions.
I hear that as MAPS blaming Megan for not identifying problems with the sessions as the reason that MAPS did not go back and review the sessions when they learned of the complaint of the sexual harm. And it's not her fault. I think any institution that is working with vulnerable populations that receives a complaint of sexual misconduct of a therapist has an obligation to immediately go in and review all trial records, including the videos of the sessions, independent of what the survivor says.
And it left me with the question of how much else has been distorted or covered up or sort of misdirected in the discussion of this particular case, and how much else is out there.
This particular treatment took place over 5 years ago, and it's the only situation of its kind of which we're aware of, and we have fired those therapists, and so we feel that we have implemented procedures that are more likely to prevent this than not going forward in the future. And so we're not confident that it'll never happen again, but we are doing whatever we can to ensure that it will never happen again.
It's okay.
Health Canada is now reviewing all other MDMA trials in the country after Megan Buisson made a complaint. No criminal action has been taken against Jensen, who maintains there was no wrongdoing. Donna Dreyer is still a practicing psychiatrist in Canada.
It reiterates why it was so important to speak out, and it really reiterates how completely unprepared and unsuited and unsuitable it is for MAPS to be spearheading itself as a leader in the psychedelic world. Because if this is the leadership, and this is the future that we're looking at, like, it is not a question of if what happened to me happens again, it's a question of when.
I know, just make sure everyone's phones are on silent as well.
Since filming with underground psychedelic supplier Julian Palmer, Four Corners has also been contacted with allegations of inappropriate sexual behaviour against him.
What's your response to that?
Oh, I would say many years ago I have made mistakes, but that's not something that is part of my world. There has been one time when I have made a move on a woman who has come to one of my groups.
And what happened? What does that mean?
That means that I kissed her during the session.
So in 2017, you made a Facebook post referencing 3 women who you say have accused you of sexually abusing them.
Mm-hmm.
What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that's none of those women came to any groups that I facilitated. I didn't sexually abuse them.
What happened?
By the way, I think this is hilarious.
I don't.
Okay. I don't think that it's appropriate for me to talk about it publicly. Okay, I think that there is an element where the plant medicine providers they do have a kind of a power, and I think that often women can be attracted to that power too. I think that is a big element, and I think that there can be an abuse of that power by males in this space.
Are you one of those males?
I'm not.
You're in a position of power and you're giving vulnerable women illegal drugs. Are you a safe person to be doing that?
I'm a very safe person, and I don't believe the word drugs is really appropriate.
Why? That's what they are.
Because we're dealing with medicines that help heal people.
Well, the evidence is still not in on that completely.
Well, I witness the healing every day, and I see it, and many people report it, and I really resent this Me Too bullshit. That is what it is, and I think it's completely inappropriate.
In Australia, one organisation is pushing harder than any other to promote psychedelic therapy.
Welcome to the launch of Mind Medicine's Burning. Now is the time. The stage is set. Our culture and the suffering of humanity is awakening our consciousness.
1 in 5 of us.
Mind Medicine Australia is a registered charity founded by investment banker Peter Hunt and his wife, opera singer Tanya de Jong. Four Corners met the couple at a health and wellness retreat in the Sunshine Coast hinterland.
Come into the present moment.
They became psychedelic advocates after taking the drugs legally overseas with a private therapist.
Patients can either go overseas and get these treatments legally, or they can find them in the underground in Australia, but that's a very unregulated environment. But if you're desperate to get well and lead a meaningful and happy life, you'll take whatever measures are necessary.
Yeah, if you start with the patient in mind and the suffering that's happening in Australia, then this should happen very quickly. But unfortunately, there's lethargy and inertia in the system. So we need a lot of energy to sort of keep fighting the inertia.
In just 3 years, they've established a training institute, a telephone hotline, and are lobbying to get psychedelics legalised for therapeutic use in clinical settings.
Look, we're a very ambitious organisation. We see a lot of people out there who are suffering, and we're determined to bring these therapies into the medical system so psychiatrists can use them with their patients. That's what we're trying to do.
Mind Medicine Australia's push to have psychedelic drugs accepted in mainstream medicine has taken an unconventional route.
Why can't I get out of bed? Antidepressants and side effects. So I tried magic mushrooms, and now I'm feeling so great.
This music video was released by the organisation early this year.
I did it for a cabaret show that was called Songs for Psychedelics, and it's actually been viewed by, I don't know, a couple of 100,000 people now, so it's drawn an enormous amount of new audiences to the work that we're doing.
But some on the inside thought the song was irresponsible and damaged the cause.
I guess it was a direct clash with the scientific community because psychedelic medicines need huge amounts of respect and caution, and many members of the community felt that a leading psychedelic mental health organisation shouldn't have created a product that promoted putting away your antidepressants and taking psychedelics, and it didn't represent our perspective on the medical model and clinical safety.
Psychologist Dr. Alana Roy managed the charity's psychological support services. When she raised staff concerns about an allegedly toxic workplace, she was shocked by the response.
I was told by a senior member of Mind Medicine that if I continued to speak out, to expect litigation, and that if I did not tell them who else was speaking out, that I would face litigation as well. They also told me in that meeting that they had started to monitor my phone and emails, and that they had hired the best technical investigator that they could find to monitor me.
I interviewed almost everyone who was part of the organization, including frontline staff, some of the back office administration, and Tanya and Peter.
Management consultant Paul Mensch volunteered to help the charity with workplace issues.
It was probably the most distraught group of people I had ever come across in several decades. And I'll even go so far as to say that a number of people were crying when they were talking to me. In this case, the quality of the relationship between Tanya and Peter and the staff was as bad as I've ever seen anything. So I think that was the core of the condition that exacerbated, the workload or whatever other complaints people had that made it worse.
Dr. Roy left Mind Medicine Australia last year.
I felt very scared for my personal safety, and I felt that I was being stalked by my employer. And I also felt very scared for members of the community who were also wanting to speak out.
Diego Pinzon was one former employee who did speak out. He made allegations on social media about the charity's treatment of staff and its silencing of critics.
Well, I think like 2 weeks later, I get an email from a lawyer saying this is a concerns notice because you've been defaming Mind Medicine Australia. They threatened me with bankruptcy.
He and his partner, Scarlett Barnett, worked in fundraising and public relations for the charity. Within weeks of starting at Mind Medicine, the pair were called into a meeting with Tanya de Jong after Scarlett Barnett became visibly upset at work.
So then she asked, do you have trauma or do you have some sort of abuse in your life that's kind of causing this trigger? And then she suggested, because, if you do have abuse, you might consider MDMA therapy. I think that could be really beneficial for you, and here's someone you can call. I'll put you in touch. You can set up a session with them.
To me, that felt really unprofessional, unethical, no boundaries, really weird. Like, she's just a soprano singer entrepreneur. You're not a mental health expert. You're also our employer. But at the same time, we were quite curious. Who is this underground therapist that Tanya refers people to? So we made a call, or she made a call.
He offered MDMA and psilocybin together as a session, and I think it would cost around $2,000.
In a statement, Peter Hunt said, "We don't make referrals to underground therapists, we don't have clinical expertise, and we don't encourage people to break the law." The number Scarlett claims she was given was for psychotherapist Yuri Seamus. He was among the first to complete Mind Medicine's certificate in psychedelic therapy.
How did you get interested in psychedelic therapy?
A lot of my own self-experimentation, just in the party scene, and I guess when my mental health was really bad, traditional therapy didn't seem to help, so I just went out by myself and, found psychedelics and took them. I noticed a lot of benefits, and I think when I became a therapist, going into the psychedelic therapy kind of world was a no-brainer for me.
He says he doesn't provide illegal drugs to patients.
So you can't be there with the person when they're having the drugs?
I can be, technically, if they've taken the drug before they've walked in, but I choose not to be engaged in that kind of process.
It sounds very much, as an outsider, that you do provide psychedelic therapy that's illegal. Do you?
I don't, no.
On social media, however, Yuri Seamus has posted about taking people's psychedelic virginity and getting paid for it, becoming an influencer for the underground drug industry, and photos of various drugs. Scarlett Barnett chose not to go ahead with the psychedelic therapy.
Have you ever referred anyone to underground psychedelic therapy?
No. And we know there are a good psychedelic therapists out there working in the underground, and yet we can't refer these people to those people. Were we to do that, and were we to be caught in doing that, that would be the end of the charity.
Psychologist Nigel Denning and counsellor Trail Dowie are directors of Mind Medicine's therapist training program. They were also supposed to take over the charity's psychological support service hotline.
Had you heard that there had been underground referrals?
Yeah, there were whispers. Yeah. I have no evidence.
What action did you take over concerns about underground referrals at MMA?
Well, I mean, we certainly didn't want to have anything to do or any engagement or involvement with anything like that. And so we decided to shut down psychological services because we didn't feel like there was appropriate governance and structure around that.
And if we're talking about a body and an organisation which is purporting clinical application, then there can be no room, in fact, at all for underground referrals or any of these kinds of things. These need to be worlds apart. They can't be They can't be connected there.
Mind Medicine Institute proudly presents the Certificate in Psychedelic Assisted Therapies.
This month, dozens of new students started Mind Medicine's $9,000 psychedelic therapy training course.
This highly acclaimed course,
but the course directors remain concerned.
Many of the leaders in the field.
It's quite heartbreaking, actually, to kind of see like the promise of the capacity to help people, to help suffering, to provide options. It's quite heartbreaking to see that dissipate.
In 2020, the charity applied to the Therapeutic Goods Administration to change MDMA and psilocybin from prohibited substances to controlled medicines. The TGA application was drafted with the help of key scientific advisor Victor Chiruta.
Victor's got great scientific knowledge.
Victor Chiruta is also a convicted drug cook. He was arrested after a drug lab bust and later pleaded guilty to manufacturing 57 grams of MDA, a drug similar to ecstasy.
We're aware that he had some problems a few years ago.
When he was 24, so he's now, however old he is, 8 years ago or something like that, and he's...
I mean, to put it in perspective, Victor is a severely disabled individual. He's got a heart of gold. He was stupid a number of years ago. But we take the view that actually we don't judge people by what they may have done years ago. We actually judge them by what they are today.
Surely this is a huge red flag.
Well, I don't really think it's, like, I'm not sure why you're making such a big thing of it, actually. Just question. Like, we're trying to focus on getting suffering people well. So this seems to be a bit of a red herring, and we can talk about it further, but I don't really know why.
While internal chaos has threatened to derail Mind Medicine, it's still determined to lobby authorities to expand access to psychedelics.
We want it to be available to all Australians who need access to these therapies, so we're very conscious about making sure it's affordable. We want to make sure it's done in an ethical and legal environment.
After being knocked back by the TGA late last year, they've applied for a second time.
What were the issues that were raised?
That the science hadn't been developed enough, the trial evidence wasn't strong enough, which is nonsense, by the way, because we've got letters in our new application from leading pharmacologists from around the world saying that the data shows strong efficacy and it shows strong safety. The delegate argued diversion risk. In other words, that somehow this psilocybin would be diverted out into the recreational area, or MDMA would be diverted out of the medical system into the recreational area.
They're hoping approval will pave the way for a psychedelic boom.
Really, there's an enormous potential industry that is starting to grow in Australia in terms of manufacturing medicines, clinical rollouts and so on.
Mind Medicine has already sought commercial contracts to secure MDMA for a proposed clinical trial. It's also patented an improved way of manufacturing the drug.
That seems like the kind of things that a commercial company would be trying to do, not a charity.
No, but that's the beauty of what we are. See, I'm an investment banker. I come out of the business world, and what we're trying to do is use some of the business efficiencies from the business world, the sense of innovation, and bring that into the charitable world. Because if we're going to create change, we need business thinking within a charitable environment.
Have you ever considered making Mind Medicine Australia into a for-profit psychedelic company?
No. And the reason we haven't is we never wanted to be in a situation where we had a conflict between making profits and helping people. Tanya and I set up this organisation to help people. And as soon as you become a for-profit, you've got that division in your mind between how do I maximise my profits to keep my investors happy and how do I help people. We don't want that conflict within the organisation.
Plus we're philanthropists and this is our sixth charity.
Four Corners has obtained a confidential presentation prepared for the charity's board. It proposed the creation of a for-profit psychedelic company, and Mind Medicine Australia would be a key shareholder. It pitched raising $50 million through investors before a significant public listing on the Australian Stock Exchange. The company's proposed business model is the manufacture, licensing, importation and distribution of psilocybin and MDMA. In a statement, Peter Hunt said, "We look at a lot of proposals. Were we to establish such a for-profit company, all profits earned by Mind Medicine Australia would be used to support its charitable purpose." The TGA will deliver a verdict on Mind Medicine Australia's submission in November, but scientific researchers are not holding their breath.
The TGA are quite conservative, so there's no way that Australia is going to be the first country in the world to recognise MDMA and psilocybin as medicines. Coming from a medical or a scientific background, we want to be looking at the data and what the data is showing, and those sort of the drama and the evangelism detracts from the science. It's a distraction, and it may actually, I think it may actually damage the perception of the field because of, because it's unrealistic.
Dr. Stephen Bright is one of 4 academics whose comments have attracted serious legal threats from Mind Medicine. He's trying to stay focused on the data.
Are you able to say how many legal letters you've received from Mind Medicine Australia?
I can say there's been 3.
And have they taken any other action against you?
I can't comment for legal reasons.
There's still hope that a scientific approach to psychedelic therapy could see it move from the underground and into the mainstream.
I would say this needs to be in the hands of people who are going to approach the science in a slow and steady manner. I think right now there's simply too many things bound up in this push for medicalization.
I have endless sympathy for folk who have run out of options and are desperate. And there is a lot of reason for hope with psychedelic treatments, but I think there's also a slippery slope from hope to hype. And when corporates or advocacy groups get taken by the hype or contribute to hype, I think what can happen is a very important process of research and development can get rushed, and the reality on the ground can be distorted to suit agendas. And really, at the end of the day, what that means is that there's an increased chance that vulnerable people will come to harm.